Shukla over there, where he will also be accompanying his crew members to conduct some very significant experiments. And ISRO has said that it wants to launch the country's first ever human space flight in 2027. Not to forget, setting up our own space station by 2035 and send an astronaut to the moon again by 2040. And so this entire mission is going to be very, very significant. Historic visuals coming in for you.
The fourth and final member of Axiom Mission 4, representing human.
Good evening. You're watching The Right Stand with me, Poonam Burde. China is hosting the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Defense Ministers meeting. Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh is in attendance, and during his address, he underlined India's principled stand: no compromise on terror. Taking a whale drive at our hostile neighbor, Rajnath Singh said that some countries use cross-border terrorism as an instrument of policy and provide shelter to terrorists. It's no secret. India has been saying this for years together, for decades together, exposing Pakistan on global fora. Rajnath Singh even reminded other members of this particular grouping that there should be no place for such double standards, because there are some countries that talk about fighting terror but only end up sheltering UN-designated terrorists. One such example, and the only example perhaps, would be Pakistan. Pakistan was not named by Raksha Mantri, but it was definitely shamed. Facing the fire was Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif, sitting at that very table when these remarks were being made, making peace with the fact that he will have to defend his country that has consistently backed terror and helped terror organizations flourish on their soil.
No country, however, large and powerful, can manage alone. In fact, the very idea of the global order, or indeed of multilateralism, is the assumption that nations have to work with each other for their mutual and the collective benefit. Peace and prosperity cannot coexist with terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of the mass destruction in the hands of the non-state actors and the terror groups. Dealing with these challenges require decisive action, and we must unite in our fight against these evils for our collective safety and security. It is imperative that those who sponsor, nurture, and utilize terrorism for their narrow and selfish ends must bear the consequences. India's zero tolerance for terrorism is manifest today through its actions. This includes our right to defend ourselves against terrorism, and we have shown that epicenters of terrorism are no longer safe, and we will not hesitate to target them. We should also take proactive steps to prevent the spread of the radicalization among our youth. The Resistance Front, which is a proxy of UN-designated terror group Lashkar-e-Toiba, claimed responsibility for the attack. The pattern of the Pahalgam terror attack matches with LET's previous terror attacks in India. In exercising its right to defend against terrorism and preempt as well as deter further cross-border terrorist attacks, India on 7th May 2025 successfully launched Operation Sindoor to dismantle cross-border terrorist infrastructure. SCO members must condemn this evil unequivocally.
Now, the highlight of today's SCO summit meeting was India walking the talk on terror. Refusing to sign the joint statement, which is a tradition after every sitting, India decided that they have to register their protest not just with words but with action. Now, India's move to not sign that joint statement wasn't just mere procedure. It was meant to disrupt the coordinated narrative or a plot that China and Pakistan, two fair-weather allies, were trying to push. China wanted to sideline India. They wanted to assert control over the SCO. Pakistan wanted to take advantage of the fact that China was the chair this time around. However, India prevailed. The joint statement did not mention the Pahalgam terror attack of April 22nd. Remember, 26 innocent lives were taken in cold blood by Pakistan-backed terrorists. The statement did not reflect India's strong position on terror, which is why Rajnath Singh refused to sign on the dotted line. While skipping any mention of that particular attack, the document, in fact, went on to mention Balochistan. accusing India of creating unrest there, an allegation Pakistan has made on multiple occasions, given absolutely no proof for it. Pahalgam's exclusion from this particular document appears to have been done at Pakistan's behest. The inclusion of Balochistan was also, of course, done by Pakistan's behest, but India saw through this kind of propaganda, this kind of narrative that both China and Pakistan wanted the SCO to believe in. But India made it clear that there will be no unanimity of this statement, which is why India refused to sign. The top intel sources have revealed to CNN News 18 that China and Pakistan wanted to use this particular platform to undermine Operation Sindoor. China did not want to acknowledge India's right to defend its sovereignty, but that's something Defence Minister Rajnath Singh made it very clear in his address. Pakistan and China are trying to internationalize the Balochistan issue as well. China also wants to protect its CPEC projects. Remember, it is important for China to back Pakistan also because they have several investments there. There are billions of dollars of China that are at stake. They want to deflect the blame towards India, unsuccessfully so. China wants to suppress narratives on the Uyghur Muslim oppression as well. Now, Pakistan has been trying, especially since the Pahalgam attack in the last 2 months, to divert the global attention from terror groups, from Operation Sindoor and the achievements of India and Indian armed forces. That was an attempt that was being made at the SCO Defence Ministers Summit as well, but that was thwarted by India. Now, this isn't the first time that India has stood its ground, especially at the SCO. India's refusal to sign this year's statement fits a particular pattern, that consensus cannot come at the cost of India's national interests. At last year's SCO summit in Astana, India refused to endorse China's ambitious One Belt, One Road initiative. Ever since its inception, India has been objecting to it. This was the third time that India had done so last year. The year before that, India was the only nation at the SCO summit to not sign an agreement that was supporting this ambitious project of China. All member nations, barring India, supported that BRI in a joint declaration. The same year, SCO Leaders Summit, which was held virtually, concluded with a joint communique. It was called the New Delhi Declaration, along with a separate joint statement on cooperation in countering terrorism. India made sure that China, Pakistan were put in their place and they had to sign on a document that spoke about terror and a united front against it. In 2018, India cited sovereignty concerns over the Belt and Road Initiative. India emerged as a silent dissenter after 2 days of deliberations during the SCO summit, which was attended by Prime Minister Modi.
The defense ministers' meeting has concluded. I understand that they could not adopt a joint statement. I also understand that certain member countries could not reach consensus on certain issues, and hence the document could not be finalized. On our side, India wanted concerns on terrorism reflected in the document, which was not acceptable to one particular country, and therefore the statement was not adopted. But we had participation of our Raksha Mantri. We issued a press release. The press release is very instructive in how we look at the threat of terrorism.
Let's open this up. Deepak Vora, former diplomat, joins us on this broadcast. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, former DG of Infantry Indian Army, and Professor Victor Gao, Vice President at the Center for China and Globalization, Chair Professor of the Soochow University, is with us on this broadcast as well. But let me begin by asking Deepak Vora, is this the first time that you've seen something like this happen, that at the end of a summit, which is procedural for a statement to come out that's signed by all members, that India has refused to do so, and for a reason that has been made amply clear to not just the SCO grouping but to the rest of the world as well?
Well, thank you very much, ma'am. Always a pleasure to be on your amazing channel. And by the way, I just heard the way you put across the issues involved. You're brilliant, ma'am. I feel quite inadequate compared to you. And then, of course, you have General Kulkarni, whose knowledge is much greater than mine. Let me begin, as we do in diplomacy, by trying to understand the basic issue. I call the SCO the 25-35-45 organization, 25% of global area, 35% of global GDP in PPP terms, and 45% of the world's population. Why was it formed? You know, ma'am, your speciality in the media is to tell us what is happening. General Kulkarni will tell you how it is happening. We try and understand why it is happening. Why was the SCO formed in the first place? What was the issue? Initially 6 countries. First there was the Shanghai 5, 6 countries, then it became 8, now it's 10. I believe it was for, as the name implies, it's a China-centric organization, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The G20 is not the Delhi G20 or the Nigeria G20 or whatever. It's a group. This one has a specific country's city's name attached to it. So it's China-centric. I believe it was created, and I've attended some of their meetings, ma'am, to enable the Chinese fox to tend to the post-Soviet henhouse. Central Asia, all right, Russia's influence must never come back there. So China is around. And then all this BRI rubbish and so on, what they have been doing. So the first thing is, what was the intention? The intention was to keep Russian influence out of Central Asia. Subsequently, of course, Russia and China became lovey-dovey, sweetheart, sweetheart. But nevertheless, they don't trust each other. And I've seen this in many, many meetings. The second issue you've raised, ma'am, I am seeing now for the first time after 52 years in diplomacy that we no longer believe in that dossier diplomacy. Now it's deadly direct action diplomacy. What did the defense minister say? Earlier we would run to everybody, uncle, look what the Pakistanis are doing, here's the file, please read it. We don't do that anymore. What did he say? He just didn't say that we'll hit the terrorists who come. He said we'll hit the epicenter and we don't need anybody's permission. We treat it as an act of war. That's a very powerful statement. And then that is followed by a refusal to sign because the Pakistanis say, oh, in Balochistan, look what's happening. All right, Tiger, let me tell the millions of people who watch your show. The Baloch are fighting for their freedom, for their independence, and they are hitting Pakistani security agencies. Your chaps come and kill 26 innocent civilian tourists on the basis of their religious identity? No. This is not acceptable to anybody at all. And I think we have done the right thing. We have shown this is no longer indecisive.
By the Raksha Mantri at this particular summit as well, in his address, the Raksha Mantri made it very clear that India has its right to self-defense, and this is exactly what we did. We had to hit back at Pakistani-based terror organizations because they have been spilling blood on Indian soil for decades together. But Professor Gao, I want to ask you this: wasn't the whole point of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the grouping, the Shanghai Five as it began, was to foster regional peace? Wasn't that one of the objectives? So when a fight against terror is being spoken of, why is it that China doesn't want a unanimous statement to come out? Why does China want to leave out the message of fighting terror?
Thank you very much. I think the SCO was founded decades ago to deal with the spillover of terrorism, extremism, and radicalization out of Afghanistan after the outbreak of the American-led Afghan war, more or less around 2001. So I think anti-terrorism was actually one of the dominant themes of the SCO to start with. So don't get us wrong that anti-terrorism of all forms, shapes, and colors should remain a dominant theme for SCO. However, whenever you have a terrorist attack taking place anywhere in the world, you need to get to the bottom of the situation. You cannot jump the gun and then immediately point to another country as if that country is the sponsor of the terrorist attack. There should be a due process, go through all the investigation, come up with all the evidence before you can point your finger at any particular sovereign country. Now,
Sure.
I think this is what happened. The terrorist attack several months ago was condemned by China, and by me personally. I condemn all kinds of terrorist attacks, but you cannot just jump the gun and say certain country was organizing the terrorist attack and you have
I
the
take
right
your
to
point there,
bomb that
Professor Gao, but
particular
let me
country.
interrupt and ask you this, because you say that you can't jump the gun. Then why is it that the same thing was done by China at the nudge of Pakistan to try and blame India for what happened in Balochistan a few weeks ago with the Jafar Express? Is there any evidence to back that India helped any of those Baloch Liberation Army members to attack that particular train, to kill so many Pakistani military agents? Is there any proof of that? Did China not jump the gun when that was included in the statement?
No, facing with these situations, I think we need to exhaust ourselves in doing thorough investigation. What's happening in Balochistan is not only terrorist attack, it's kind of trying to split Balochistan away from Pakistan. So it's much more than a terrorist attack. It's a separatist movement, very much against the fundamental national interest of Pakistan as a united country. And I think Pakistan, as a united country, has all right, as any other country faced with such separatist movement, to use all the wherewithals at its disposal to fight off such separatist movement. So I think the nature of the situation is completely different. You are talking about an isolated terrorist attack involving Indian nationals on the one hand. You are talking about a highly organized and structured separatist movement trying to pull a very much large part
and the Pakistani administration and the government, the army, can fight the Baloch Liberation Army on its own. Why blame India was the question that I was asking. But Lieutenant General Kulkarni, we've seen this kind of narrative that's being built by Pakistan on multiple global fora like this, especially in the last 2 months, in the aftermath of the Pahalgam attack and, of course, Operation Sindoor. Pakistan has been running desperate, trying to knock on doors of several of its allies. Unfortunately, most of them, including the United States, have backed India's right to self-defense and to defend itself in the face of such terror attacks.
With utmost respect to Mr. Victor, because he seemed to have jumped the gun in blaming India when it came to Balochistan, and he's taking time to blame Pakistan for what it is doing in India and using terrorism as an instrument of state policy. I think he has his point of view. I will not dispute it, because he puts terrorism as one part and he's calling Balochistan something in which he does not hesitate in blaming India for what is happening in Balochistan, which is absolutely incorrect. For anybody who goes back to 1948 until date would know very much that Balochistan wasn't part of Pakistan, and it was by force taken by Pakistan, and therefore that whatever is happening today in Balochistan is the cause of the Balochis themselves. India has got nothing to do with it. Well, even in the Mumbai attack, we gave Pakistan enough evidence, and we did tell not just Pakistan, the entire world, that Pakistan was deeply involved. Pakistan was using, is using, and I'm sure will continue to use terrorism as an instrument of state policy. There is no denying the fact about it. There is duplicity, and duplicity comes from all over. So let's not say that, well, Pahalgam was a separate issue altogether, and that one required time to get to know whether Pakistan was actually involved or not involved, and that India was jumping the gun by blaming Pakistan. I thought that is highly, highly incorrect. Otherwise, why else would whatever transpired for 4 days between India and Pakistan, would Pakistan lump it? And why would Pakistan then come on its knees and accept it? It's a very simple thing. There's nothing wrong in it, and we must accept it. However, I do respect for whatever that be, the friendship between the two countries, higher than the Himalayas, deeper than the ocean, sweeter than the honey, all said and done, adequate investments into Pakistan. We know what exactly is happening in China-Pakistan economic corridor. Perfectly fine. That's between the two countries. But not to blame Pakistan, but to blame India, and to take out a joint communique trying to show that, well, India can be cornered, definitely not acceptable. And if you have to be good friends and neighbors, it's very, very important. Very, very important for both the countries to be respecting each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. There is no denying the fact, and nothing can move. Terror and talk can't go together. Expansionism and talk can't go together. Where is the doubt? I think these are organizations, these are regional organizations which are for political reasons, economic reasons, international defense and security cooperation, and the ambassador rightly brought out 24% of the world's area. Imagine 42% of the world's population, 23% of the world's GDP. What more better organization can it be? It's one of the finest organizations which, if they use resources and the need of it is being there, and definitely an organization which has RAT, nothing else but RAT. RAT is what? A regional anti-terror structure, and that is basically it for that. I thought, yeah, well, there has been, and I'm so glad that our defense minister did not sign the joint communique, because it was very essential to be able to convey to all countries concerned that, look, terror has no religion, terror has no country, terror has nothing, terror is terror, and absolute terror, which must be condemned by one and all, irrespective from where it originates and who are the people responsible for it.
Absolutely.
In this case, Pakistan is responsible. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Victor Gao, this also sets the stage of what we are going to see in a few months from now. This is the SCO Defense Ministers meeting. We are going to be seeing the heads of state SCO meeting in a few months from now as well. Do you think this sort of sets the stage for what is expected to happen? Now, maybe China is, doesn't have an option, so to say, other than back Pakistan and try and take that nudge that Pakistan gives you your way, because there are millions of dollars as far as the CPEC project goes that are at stake for China and Pakistan. They have their interests to look at monetarily as well, which is perhaps why they're trying to take sides here. Is that what you think is happening?
No, I don't think so. First of all, CPEC is a live, very dynamic global project, and CPEC is just part of that BRI global initiative. So many countries have participated. According to the latest account, more than 160 countries have become members, promoting the BRI initiative throughout the world. The fact that India does not want to join is actually very much to the loss of India. I personally would urge the Indian government to rethink about this situation, because what India needs is high-quality connectivity projects. And India, without doing its domestic connectivity projects, try to do this IMAC, for example, the India-Middle East European corridor, is a pipe dream, because you need to build up your own domestic connectivity projects first before you can really demonstrate that you have the capability to build up connectivity projects outside of India. That's why it is time to call on India itself to reconsider the BRI initiative and try to become a very active participant.
But India's
benefit
connectivity projects
of the Indian people.
Sure, but India's connectivity projects and what India does inside or what it plans to do outside of it, whether ambitious or not as China thinks, is India's prerogative. And those countries that are involved with this Middle East-Europe corridor seem to be on board.
Absolutely.
They don't seem to doubt. They don't seem to doubt India's capabilities or whether this is a pipe dream, like you say.
Ma'am,
well,
you can't expect
it's
him
going
to
to be
tell the
proven
truth.
whether
He's
it's
being
pipe
monitored.
dream or not. But it is not right for India to deny the best interest of the Indian people, of not building up your own domestic connectivity.
Who is China to tell us what is the interest of the Indian people?
CPEC from happening and try to build up
Professor Gao, India is not stopping. Professor Gao, India is not stopping China from doing what it's doing as far as the CPEC project goes in Pakistan. Unfortunately for China and for Pakistan, those people who live there have a problem with it, which is why we've seen the kind of protests that have broken out, the kind of violence that has broken out, unfortunate lives that have been lost of Chinese nationals. And yet, for some reason, India keeps getting blamed. But Deepak Vora, is this a pattern? No matter what the issue, no matter what the problem, turn around and blame India whether you have proof or not. And that seems to be a pattern both these fair weather allies seem to be following.
Ma'am, the good professor doesn't believe what he's saying, but the poor man doesn't have the possibility of saying his mind. Otherwise, we know the kind of system. I think 1.5 million Uyghurs also know what the problem is when you speak your mind. Now, all this thing about connectivity and the good professor wanting to tell India what to do. Thank you very much, sir. We have more people than your country, and we know exactly what is good for us. Even as we speak, when the good professor was talking about investigating terrorism, ma'am, even as we are speaking now, and I'm looking at 1915 hours on the 26th of June, there is a terror encounter going on in Udhampur with 4 Jaish-e-Mohammed, your friends, Professor, of an international terrorist organization proscribed by a racket called the United Nations. The encounter is going on right now. What investigation would you like us to do, sir? When they are coming with guns to kill innocent people. We say, wait. First, let's investigate who you are. Show us your passport. Show us your ID card. Oh, no, sir. No. We know because we have suffered. And when you suffer, when China gets hit, you hit back violently. We don't comment on that. That's your prerogative. So may I request you, Professor, we are very polite people, but we also know how to defend our interests. And what the General has just told you, one of the most highly decorated, let me complete, sir. One of the most highly decorated members of the Indian Army. We know what happened in Galwan. We know what part of Indian territory is occupied by 2 countries, in fact. We know it all. You can investigate till the cows come home. What we want is direct action, and this is what we are seeing today. One more terror attack from your buddies, higher than the mountains, deeper than the oceans, sweeter than honey. The honey has gone rancid, the mountains have fallen, the ocean is coming up to the surface. Let me just tell you, one more terror attack, and all hell will break loose.
And India has made that clear. Any future act of terror is act of war, and that's how it will be treated. Yes, Professor Gao, 30 seconds, please. I need to get in Lieutenant General Kulkarni as well.
Yeah. Two points. One is that my advice for India is don't wear war on your lips. It's not a good recipe for you.
We don't, sir.
Let's promote
We
peace.
don't, but we cannot be sitting there waiting for the enemy to finally see the light of day and not attack innocent civilians.
The second point is even more importantly, being a member of SCO, India, Pakistan, all the other members should work together to come up with a framework agreement.
Absolutely,
so
they should work together to fight against terror. Why was that not seen today?
Against any other country. And we should work together to get to the bottom of each of the terrorist attack and try to really get to the bottom of the situation.
I agree with what you say, sir, but I think this advice was meant for Pakistan and not for India. Because so Pakistan, your ally, needs to listen to this. That we have to work together to fight terror. Unfortunately, China today couldn't manage to get that unanimity and get the sign on the dotted line of that statement which spoke about a fight against terror.
The only outlier to prevent the joint communique from happening from the SCO defense minister. It's a great shame.
Well, it's a shame that China couldn't do its job properly, sir, as the chair, because they should have put the mention of terror and fight against it in that document so that India would have signed on that dotted line. It is a shame. I agree with you. It is a shame that we could not gather unanimity on something as important as a united fight against terror. I agree with you there. But Lieutenant General Kulkarni, I want you to have the last word here. As far as this particular summit is concerned,
reconsider its membership.
Is this what we are going to be seeing from here on? If China and Pakistan have decided to band together, we are going to be seeing several such summits where India, Pakistan, India, China are going to come face to face.
Maybe
is this
India
now
should
led the stage?
Its membership of SCO. That's my personal recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Victor. No country should have war, and no country should have war on its lips, and no country must instigate either. Now let's take the case of the CCEC. Where does it run from? China knows it where it runs from an area which is claimed by us and has been taken over by us. Not only that, it is a part of India. And if you have it, go through it, and then you say, well, let's not talk war, let's keep instigating each other, but let's not talk war, that's hypocrisy. And that hypocrisy must not be acceptable. We must be friends, we are neighbors, we must be friends, there is no doubt. And I as a military man would say, we must be friends, there is no doubt about it, because we are the ones who guard it, we understand what it means. But it is very important not to have war on this thing. You must not instigate either. You cannot instigate Pakistan. You cannot use Pakistan to keep, keep troubling India.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And friendship is not a sign of weakness. It does not mean that we'll sit idly by while we see the enemy come into our territory and spill blood of innocent civilians. I have to leave it there. I thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here on this edition of The Right Stand. The other story that we are going to be talking about is a historic leap, and that's the successful docking of Axiom 4.
You who have got the chance to see the Earth from a vantage point. It has been a wonderful ride.
When Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk on moon in 1969, he said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Today, as India's Shubhanshu Shukla became the first Indian aboard the International Space Station, it marks a giant leap for India's space journey. The 39-year-old Indian Air Force pilot, strapped into his seat inside the Crew Dragon spacecraft, waved to a billion from space this morning. A namaskar for all those that were listening to him. Here's how the Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla piloted the spacecraft to dock at the Harmony module of the ISS. The Dragon capsule approached the ISS systematically. We had seen that it was going to be taking about 28 hours from liftoff yesterday. It paused at several designated points from about 400 meters inward. There was ground control that was authorized, that was being monitored from here in the United States at every progression. At about 20 meters, this craft was guided to the module's docking port. There were laser sensors, there were cameras that guided the spacecraft eventually towards that particular port of Harmony 2, which is also known as Node 2 of the ISS. The connection to the ISS then occurred in two phases. There was a magnetic soft capture that was done first by the particular craft, and then there was a mechanical hard capture that was done so that there is an airtight seal that is maintained, that there are no leakages. There were checks that was done as well before the crew existing at the ISS welcomed the crew that was on board Axiom 4. Now, there are several lessons to have been learnt for the world and, of course, for India from this particular mission. Now, ISRO has taken several large strides in the last few decades from an institution that initially focused on harnessing space technology for national development. Today, India's Space Research Organisation is making its mark in launching several complex missions to the Mars, to the south side of the moon. Next step in this journey is India's first manned mission. Here's how Shubhanshu Shukla, this particular mission, Axiom 4, will help India achieve that vision, will help India in that direction. Now, this AX4 mission, or the Axiom 4 mission, will train astronauts like Shubhanshu Shukla for future ISRO flights. He perhaps will be part of Gaganyaan, which is going to be India's first manned mission, which means he gets first-hand experience. There are critical inputs for this manned mission that he gets from this particular mission. He was the man in charge to dock the spacecraft to the ISS today. Gaganyaan will be building on the experiments that are going to be done by Axiom 4. Remember, there are at least 60 experiments that are being conducted during this 14-day period that the 4-member crew is going to be at on board the ISS. Another reason why this particular mission helps India, helps ISRO, is that it helps to develop and validate technology for all future missions, not just for Gaganyaan, for all future missions that we plan to. It also does boost India's vision to establish a Bharatiya Antariksh Station. That's something that is being hoped for, that is being envisioned by 2035.
I am number 634. That's a privilege. No, but to be fair, it is a privilege to be amongst the few who have got the chance to see the Earth from a vantage point that I have been able to see now. It has been a wonderful ride. It has been great, and I was looking forward to come to space. It is something to look forward to as such. But the minute I entered the International Space Station and you guys, this crew, you just made me feel so welcome, as if you literally opened your doors, like your house doors for us. That's true. So, but it was fantastic. I feel even better. Whatever expectation I had of coming here, they were surpassed by the view. Of course, that's the big part of it, but by you guys as well. So thank you so much. I think this was fantastic. This is wonderful, and I'm very, very confident that the next 14 days are going to be amazing, doing, as you said, advancing science and research and working together. Thank you so much.
Let's open this up. Dr. Amitabh Ghosh, space scientist, member of NASA's Mars Exploration Rover, is with us on this broadcast. Sean Proctor, American astronaut, and Jonathan Levy, space commentator, is with us as well. Dr. Ghosh, let me begin by asking you, I'm sure you've tracked all that's happened in the last 28 hours since liftoff to the docking. What are your first thoughts?
Well, it's a very big journey for India. I think the big thing is Gaganyaan is happening in a year or two. And so this journey is very significant in that respect, that, there will be some learnings from the operations, from the interface, from the experience. Maybe there'll be some feedback given to the Gaganyaan designers, the engineers who are designing Gaganyaan. Maybe there'll be some changes. And so it's fascinating, and we are in a very interesting place in human history where the cost of spaceflight has just gone down, and probably with the development of Starship, it will go down further. So how much further? Maybe 95% is probably 95 to 98% is the reduction in cost of spaceflight when you start reusing launch vehicles. So we are in this very interesting part of spaceflight, and this is perhaps equal to plane travel, like commercial aviation in the 1900s. It was very expensive. There were people saying that, well, why do we need to do this? So we are kind of in this very interesting part where spaceflight can go to the mass market if this became this cheap. There may be a section of the people who think that, well, going to the space station or going to the moon for a vacation is something they would like to pursue. And if there are like 10,000 people like that, and the journey is $50,000 or $100,000 per journey, then a whole new sector of space tourism might open up. And the indications are all there. All the rich people are trying to invest.
Yes.
So for normal commercial aviation, at that time, JRD Tata, Henry Ford, they were the people who were getting into the business. Now you see Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos trying to set up a base on the moon. So it's a very opportune moment in history.
An inspiring time, of course. Sean Proctor, that's one way to look at it. But I want to speak about India as well. And if you have any thoughts about how India has reached where it has, how India's Space Research Organization has become a force to reckon with, if you will, in the last few years, isn't it?
Yeah, and the big thing is that India has invested in its greatest asset, which is human capital. Lots of engineers, lots of people being inspired to take advantage of this, developing new wave in space. And I think it's really exciting because, when you see missions like Axiom 4 and the people who are going on it, that inspires the next generation to want to be a part of what's happening. And if space exploration is going to hit $1 trillion by the end of this decade, then we need everybody to be engaged, particularly thinking from the standpoint of entrepreneurs. How do we take and leverage what's happening not only in low Earth orbit, but as just said, as we go back to the moon and on to Mars, we need all kinds of new innovations because solving for space is all about solving for Earth. When we talk about why go to the moon and on to Mars, because human space flight, when we're solving those hard questions like what is the best energy for the moon, or what is the best water recycling for the moon, or what is the best food system to grow on Mars, those innovative solutions are created here on Earth. And I know that India is going to be part of helping us find those solutions. And the great part about that is that those solutions become spin-off technologies to make Earth more sustainable. And that's really why we push ourselves to go out there, is really so that the Earth can not just survive but thrive for the future generations.
And there are several of these experiments that are being conducted in this 14-day period in itself, Jonathan Levy. A lot of them are exclusively for India that Shubhanshu Shukla is going to look at, some of which India and ISRO hopes to take forward in our future missions, including Gaganyaan, which perhaps would happen in about 2 years from now.
Absolutely. I mean, these experiments are there to develop the knowledge of human spaceflight, and particularly spaceflight that in the future might take much longer periods of time. So a lot of those experiments are about the effects on the human body, what happens to organisms in space, looking at screens in space, so that really the future Indian astronauts will be well prepared for the missions coming up in the next few years, but also to take their part in long-term missions, be that to the moon or even further afield.
Absolutely. It is going to give a sort of a template, a sort of book to follow, perhaps. Knowledge is extremely important. It's extremely going to be enriching for future generations to follow. The fact that we see this kind of private or privatization of space exploration, Dr. Ghosh, do you think that's something that is also important given in the day and age that we live? Governments have been spending the kind of money that they have. India, of course, has been at the forefront of cost-effective missions. But even then, role of private players is going to be extremely important to ensure that this reaches the masses and this is not really kept for the elite clubs.
Right. So if you think about it, each government is strapped for money, wherever in the world you look, and this is taxpayer money. So I think a field can develop only this much with taxpayer money. and money is scarce everywhere. So it is the mass market. It is when there is a customer on earth who thinks that, well, there's some services that he can obtain in a certain sector. It is only then that field develops. So here also, if there was something in space that an average person, or not an average person, maybe a rich person on earth perhaps needs from there. Say we're talking about, say, space mining. What if there is some sort of rare earths which are found on the moon or any other asteroid? Would there be a business case, particularly with this decrease in launch costs because you're reusing the launch vehicles? So yes, so if you think of how much money is spent in space exploration, it is all by the governments, and there is no profitable margin in space. There is, maybe that is what Jeff Bezos is trying to see, well, would people pay to go to the moon, say, for 2 weeks? And what is the price point? And how many people would go? So once some sort of a product market fit happens, nobody thought Disney World could be a thing, right? Who would go to a swamp in Florida to look at Mickey Mouse, right? It sounds ridiculous. You should see the venture capital presentation of Walt Disney. It sounds ridiculous. But if you go to Disney World, you'll find people from New Zealand are coming to Florida, people from Europe are coming, people from India are coming, and people from the United States are coming. It's almost an American ritual to visit Disney World at least once in your lifetime. So what if that became an aspiration amongst normal people here, that we'll go to space once in our lifetimes? So then you're talking of $1 trillion business. So this can all happen.
But Sean Proctor, could that actually happen? I mean, is that something that you see happening? Because, well, we'd want the moon to be Disneyland, but it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to be as easy to go to Disneyland or to any other place on Earth as we would want going to space to be.
Well, I think, it's all about the entrepreneurs leading the way. And yes, we've got to move it from it being a domain of governments to these entrepreneurs who are creative, thinking of ways in which to make it viable business. I think one of the things that's going to lead the way that we haven't talked about is going to be sports on the moon. I mean, sports is one of the biggest industries globally. And when you think about car racing and you think about air races and how early on they really pushed the technology to go where it is today in each of these fields. And so I think that there's going to be an entrepreneur out there that's going to figure out some kind of way of bringing sports to the lunar surface, and it's going to captivate people. And just like sports here on the Earth, there are going to be people who are going to want to be cheering from the stands on the moon. And I look forward to seeing not only those kind of innovative solutions, but again, really, the thing that I want entrepreneurs who are listening is solving for space, solving for Earth. How do you make it so it's a duality where what you can figure out on the moon or on Mars or even in low Earth orbit benefits us here on Earth? And whether it's from the entertainment side, which sports can be, or on the innovative side when it comes to solving wicked problems around climate change and food and hunger and resource management and waste management, data centers on the moon, things like this, we need solutions for. And there's somebody probably in India thinking about some clever solution to these problems. And that's why this is so exciting by having Captain Shukla there. He's inspiring that next generation to dream big and reach for not just low Earth orbit, but beyond.
Absolutely. And, what a day that would be if we actually were to see any of this actually happening. And I would definitely want to be there to see if that does happen. But Jonathan Levy, as far as these kind of experiments that are being conducted with the hope that it's possible to do that more than once and more than on one mission, the kind of experiments that are being done on this particular mission on Axiom 4 also is one of the very important things that they plan to do is about talking about muscle degeneration or talking about the kind of loss that happens to your muscle in space. That's something that Shubhanshu Shukla is also going to be leading, and that's important given in the light of what has just happened with what happened with Butch Williams and with what happened with Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams.
Absolutely. I mean, the effects on the human body in space are yet to be fully understood. In whether it's cosmic radiation or degeneration of muscle tissue or bone density, these are important things to study. And also, they inform medics back on Earth dealing with similar processes in diseases. So these are very important things that need to be understood. And work is going on this mission to do that, also looking at organisms, how they're affected in space compared to the same organism on Earth, for example, or taking processes like photosynthesis and whether these could be parts of a future environmental system on future spacecraft. So some great work taking place now through the private enabled mission through Axiom, who are planning to build space stations in the future, probably take over from the ISS, and we're going to see a domination of private money in space, which will open up so much great work. And India is at the forefront of that, and I'm sure will continue to do so.
Before I wrap this up, I want to give you quick 30 seconds to everyone here on the panel, and I want to ask you, what is the one thing that you're looking forward to find answers to, perhaps, or one thing that you want to know at the end of this 14 days? Amitabh Ghosh, you first.
Well, nothing. See, I think the biggest excitement, what I'm looking forward to, is when India has developed its own vehicle, which is Gaganyaan, and which has Indian astronauts. I think that's the big thing. And it's a very big jump from robotic space flight. It's much more difficult, and that's in the works. And I'm very excited that this will happen in the next couple of years.
Sean Proctor, your one thing that you would want?
I think that a lot of times we focus on while in space, but to me, I think the real work happens when you come back from space. After my 3-day mission on Inspiration 4, it was about inspiring. And I think Captain Shukla coming back and really being able to share the experience of not only the science and what they learned, but being able to be out there and inspiring, again, that next generation. Because the biggest investment you can have right now, I think, is in human capital and your entrepreneurship and inspiring them to come up with unique and novel ways to lower the cost of space flight and again, solve for space while solving for Earth.
Absolutely. Last 30 seconds, Jonathan Levy.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Plus, I think it's the combination of humans in space with the technology that's being developed alongside it. We've seen the automated missions that have gone to the moon, and that technology combined with human ingenuity and human presence is going to make the big leaps forward. And I look forward to seeing the next steps India will take with those two aspects.
I have to leave it there. I thank you all for joining us here on this edition and with that enriching and very fascinating conversation. We are shifting focus now to the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, which is one of the most revered pilgrimages in the world. There was a 5-year hiatus due to COVID-19 pandemic. There were geopolitical tensions between India and China as well. But this sacred journey is finally set to resume. It happens from the 30th of June. In our first report from the Mansarovar base camp, my colleague Siddhant Mishra follows the preparations, the mood and the excitement at the base camp of Kailash Mansarovar. I'm leaving you with that report.
Kailash Mansarovar base camp. It has taken us 4 flights in 3 days to reach the base camp. First batch of pilgrims from India has already reached the base camp. This is the first time when Yatra has resumed after the gap of 5 years. The Kailash Mansarovar Yatra is restarting after 5-year break, initially suspended due to the pandemic and subsequently due to border tensions. The Ministry of External Affairs conducted a computerized draw to select 750 pilgrims from the online applications received. A total of 750 pilgrims will be participating in the Yatra. Now, talking about the routes, then this pilgrimage will be conducted via 2 routes, Lipu Lake and Nathula. 5 batches of 50 pilgrims each will travel via Lipu Lake. 10 batches of 50 pilgrims each will travel via Nathula. The yatra is expected to run from June to August. The pilgrimage to Mount Kailash and Mansarovar Lake is religiously significant for Hindus, Jains and Buddhists.
मन से एकदम पक्का रहना चाहिए कि नहीं बाबा तेरी चरणों में मुझे आना है, ये एक चीज़ है। और प्रोटोकॉल ऐसा है कि हर रोज़ का तुम्हें 6 से 8 किलोमीटर चलना ही है, क्योंकि सिर्फ यहाँ पे चलना ही है और तुम्हें एल्टीट्यूड सिकनेस ना हो जाए उसके लिए ही ध्यान रखना है।
टोटल 20 दिन का है, करीब 20 दिन का है और अनुभव बहुत ही अच्छा रहा हमारा।
कैसे पता लगा कि MEA ने लॉटरी निकाली है और अब जो दोनों देशों के बीच संबंध हैं वो फिर से नॉर्मलसी की ओर बढ़ चुके हैं और इस बार यात्रा होने वाली है?
जब हमने रजिस्ट्रेशन किया था तो उसमें रजिस्ट्रेशन में जो आया तो उसमें हमें ये पता लगा कि जो है अब उसके रजिस्ट्रेशन के बाद 5,000 रुपये भर के जो है जब फाइनल मैसेज सिलेक्टेड का आया तो हमारा जब फाइनल हुआ
हो गया। कैसा अनुभव किया आपने? आप गए यात्रा करने की, पहले तो ये बताइए कि कितने दिन का आप लोगों को टाइम लगा और कैसा अनुभव था?
ये टोटल 20 दिन का है, करीब 20 दिन का है और अनुभव बहुत ही अच्छा रहा हमारा। जो है दोनों गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से अरेंजमेंट अच्छा रहा, मतलब इंडिया गवर्नमेंट का तो था ही, यहाँ पर आने के बाद चाइना गवर्नमेंट का भी बहुत अच्छा अरेंजमेंट रहा। जैसे चाइनीज गवर्नमेंट ने हमारे रुकने का, खाने का, पीने का, मतलब काफी एडजस्टिव माहौल,
काफी अच्छा माहौल था।
काफी अच्छा माहौल।
कोई दिक्कत हुई यात्रा के वक्त?
नहीं, यात्रा तो मुश्किल है, इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है, लेकिन यात्रा के वक्त जो मुश्किल मतलब
वो कट जाती है,
वो मतलब भोले की नगरी में आके जो है वो उसके आगे कुछ नहीं है।
So we are at a base camp in Mansarovar, and this base camp is 30 kilometers away from the Holy Mount. This camp has been prepared for the yatris coming from India and various other places. In fact, first batch of yatris from India have concluded their parikrama. They are resting right now, and from June till August, there's going to be many more batches coming to Kailash Mansarovar for darshan. Now, there has been a special arrangement which has been made for these yatris. This entire premises, in fact, there are rooms available. The rooms have been allocated to the yatris. These are the rooms with all the basic amenities, proper bedding, proper toilets, etc. And there is also the tent system where I'm reporting from. So these tents have also been set up for the yatris, so they can go and come back and rest here.
Dangerous. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Welcome back. Staying with our live and rolling coverage from inside the ISS. We are bringing you these live visuals as, remember, the docking of the spacecraft of Dragon, SpaceX's Dragon has finally happened. And what you can see over there are visuals from inside the ISS, which are being live streamed by NASA as that hatch has been opened. And what you're witnessing right now are historic visuals of those 4 astronauts which have finally arrived. And indeed, history in the making. Remember, they are going to be over here on ISS for 14 days, and ISRO has in fact secured a seat for Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla over there, where he will also be accompanying his crew members to conduct some very significant experiments. And ISRO has said that it wants to launch the country's first ever human space flight in 2027. Not to forget, setting up our own space station by 2035 and send an astronaut to the moon again by 2040. And so this entire mission is going to be very, very significant. Historic visuals coming in for you.
the fourth and final member of Axiom Mission 4, representing Hunor in the nation of Hungary, their first visit to the International Space Station as well. Great big hugs and handshakes across all members of Expedition 73 and Axiom Mission 4 is Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers of NASA, along with Johnny Kim, Kirill Peskov, Sergei Ryzhikov, and Alexei Zabritsky of Roscosmos, and Takuya Onishi, commander of Expedition 73 and of JAXA, with handshakes and hugs for Peggy Whitson, Shubhanshu Shukla, Sławomir Uznański-Wisniewski, and Tibor Kapu. And with their arrival to the International Space Station, that now makes 288 visitors to the orbiting laboratory. Axiom Mission 4 is now aboard the International Space Station. Commander Peggy Whitson, in her return to the orbiting laboratory, her fifth flight. 3 is a member of NASA, and her second as commander of Axiom, an Axiom Space private astronaut mission, commander of Axiom 2 and here of Axiom 4. Regaling the crew with smiles and stories. To her left, or our left from her viewpoint, to her right, Sławomir Uznański-Wisniewski of ESA, Shubhanshu Shukla to her left of ISRO, and Tibor Kapu on that far right-hand side of our viewpoint. The crew is safely aboard the International Space Station. Welcome again to Axiom Mission 4. And we are continuing to target a formal welcome remark from the crew and being joined by the Expedition 73 team as well. That'll be at approximately 8:35 a.m. Central Time. And from there, they will receive a safety briefing and begin their approximately 2-week mission aboard the International Space Station, in which they will participate in around 60 research investigations representing 31 countries, with more than 24 of those experiments sponsored by the ISS National Lab. And there they all are.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Welcome back. Staying with our live and rolling coverage from inside the ISS. We are bringing you these live visuals as, remember, the docking of the spacecraft of Dragon, SpaceX's Dragon, has finally happened. And what you can see over there are visuals from inside the ISS, which are being live streamed by NASA as that hatch has been opened. And what you're witnessing right now are historic visuals of those 4 astronauts which have finally arrived. And indeed, history in the making. Remember, they are going to be over here on ISS for 14 days. And ISRO has in fact secured a seat for Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla over there, where he will also be accompanying his crew members to conduct some very significant experiments. And ISRO has said that it wants to launch the country's first ever human space flight in 2027. Not to forget, setting up our own space station by 2035 and send an astronaut to the moon again by 2040. And so this entire mission is going to be very, very significant. Historic visuals coming in for you.
The fourth and final member of Axiom Mission 4, representing Hunor in the nation of Hungary, their first visit to the International Space Station as well.
Viewers, you'll all remember when India's Prime Minister fact-checked Donald Trump last week. And now, viewers, India's Defense Minister, today, this morning, has checkmated China on its own soil. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has refused to sign a joint statement drafted by China at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meet because it did not mention the 22nd April Pahalgam terror attack that took 26 lives, viewers. And you can see him there. He gets the document, he drops his pen, he knows what's in it, viewers. It's a very clever attempt, very, very clever attempt, viewers, by China to draft chicanery into the fine print. Viewers, while this draft agreement skipped any mention of Pahalgam, the document cleverly tried to weave in a mention of Balochistan. That would have, viewers, led Pakistan to draw a parallel and accuse India of creating unrest there. Unlike after 26/11, this time, India didn't fall for any Sharm el-Sheikh-like trickery to draw an equivalence between India and Pakistan. Back then, viewers, Pakistan cleverly wove in the Balochistan reference, suggesting that Pakistan itself was a victim of terror, cross-border terror, equating itself with India. That is what China wanted to do this time, viewers. But the Raksha Mantri, his advisors, clearly, others in the Indian government were very wise to this trick, viewers. We didn't fall for it. Maybe the UPA did, but we didn't. Let me give you an insight into what we know. And sources have told us that China attempted to pull a fast one on India at the SCO. It drafted a declaration omitting the Pahalgam reference, but it included a reference to Jafar Express hijacking. Now, if you remember, viewers, that happened in Balochistan, where a train was hijacked by Balochi separatists. As you know, there has been an ongoing movement for freedom. Balochistan never really, viewers, signed an agreement with Pakistan. It was taken over. In fact, Frontier Gandhi, as he was called, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, wanted no partition. But viewers, he was fooled by the Pakistani military establishment, forced into signing a document that led